What is going on with Nigel Farage?
The Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has resigned as an MP, triggering a by-election in which he will stand again.
It follows a donations row and growing scrutiny of his finances. He says it's time to fight back.
But Mr Farage's move may backfire. The major parties have called it a stunt and refused to take part.
Farage's primary challenger is now Count Binface, a self-described 5,072-year-old intergalactic space warrior from the planet Sigma 9.
As you probably know, Nigel Farage is the leader of the UK populist party Reform UK. He's the man who successfully pushed the UK into Brexit.
We've got our country back!
And who, after months of leading the polls, has got many in the media hyping him to be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. But now, things aren't going quite so well. He's under scrutiny for secret financial transactions, the media, long on his side, is turning on him, and he's in a by-election to re-win his old seat, but under challenge from a man dressed in a bin. Nigel Farage is probably the UK's most consequential politician for a generation. He's someone I've met many times and whose career I've been watching for years. And in this video, I want to explain why it's all going wrong, looking not just at the current mess, but why long-term he faces bigger problems than many seem to realise. Also, I want to look at this guy.
Do you live in the constituency?
I do tonight.
Well, it sounds as though you don't.
What do you?
No, of course not. I don't live here, no.
So why should I?
Well, a lot of candidates like to boast that they're local. You're obviously not too concerned about that.
Well, I'm looking at the putative Prime Minister Nigel Farage. He spends more time in America than in Clacton.
I mean, first, why does the UK have so many of these joke political parties and candidates? But I also want to explain how Count Binface symbolises something that's going wrong for populists, not just in the UK, but also in America, where I think there's a similar dynamic starting to undermine Donald Trump.
Farage, Nigel Paul, Reform UK, 21,200.
This story really starts in 2024 with Nigel Farage's Reform UK party doing unexpectedly well in the general election. They came in third, hot on the heels of the two traditional big parties in UK politics, with Nigel Farage, after 8 attempts, finally getting his seat in the UK House of Commons. Then, a year later, Reform stormed the local elections. They gained a string of high-profile defections to the party, and election models predicted them to win the next general election.
It puts Reform UK on course to be the next government and Nigel Farage on course to be the next Prime Minister.
One interesting thing about all this, though, is that it almost didn't happen. Back in 2024, when the election was coming up, Nigel Farage actually ruled out running for Parliament, which would have been bad for his party. I mean, they had this other guy in charge, a guy called Richard Tice, but he wasn't very charismatic, and I think most people thought there would be an underwhelming result without Farage being in charge. But then, a month after announcing he wasn't going to run, Farage U-turned and said he was going to stand.
I've changed my mind. It's allowed, you know. We're launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow in the Essex seaside town of Clacton.
This was a surprise. I remember people asking, why did he change his mind? At the time, I think most saw this as Nigel Farage just sensing an opportunity. He's always been quite good at reading the political mood, so when he U-turned and then went on to win so many votes, people just saw it as more evidence of that skill. But now it turns out there might have been another reason why he changed his mind. We now know that in March of that year, Farage met with senior Reform figures and explained he didn't want to become an MP because it would mean losing $1 million a year in lost earnings. He was making money presenting GB News, promoting gold. I mean, as we'll see, there's all sorts of things he was doing. But then, it was recently reported, this man, Christopher Harborne, a Thai-based crypto billionaire, gave Nigel Farage £5 million. As I explained in a short video on my second channel, which, by the way, you should all go and subscribe to and help me out, 5 years is the normal length for a parliamentary term. So maybe this $5 million was just $1 million in lost earnings every year, so 5 years. Of course, this does lead to another question, which is why would this crypto billionaire give so much money to Nigel Farage?
We are going to launch in Britain a crypto revolution.
Well, it just happens that Reform are very pro-crypto. In fact, according to BBC reporter Faisal Islam, the only piece of draft legislation Reform has ever published was its Crypto Assets and Digital Finance Bill. That is, until it disappeared recently from their website. Also in June, it was revealed that Farage had met the Bank of England governor, lobbying him to abandon crypto regulation that would have damaged the interests of, yep, you guessed it, Christopher Harborne, crypto billionaire. Of course, Farage and this billionaire deny any link between the money and the lobbying. This was just a gift. I mean, it's a lovely thing. Why be so negative about it? Anyway, whatever the reasons behind it, this gift wasn't declared, which would appear to be against the parliamentary rules, and so there has been an investigation from the Parliamentary Standards Committee into the affair, one that looked likely to lead via a suspension and recall petition to an embarrassing by-election where Farage would be forced to run again for his own seat. But this wasn't the only scandal going around. It was also recently revealed that this guy, a man known as Posh George and who is a convicted fraudster and who once wrote a book called How to Launder Money, no, I'm not joking, had been funding lots of things for Farage. Again, all undeclared and apparently against the rules. Also, apparently he calls Nigel Farage daddy, which is strange. Also, there's a police investigation into Posh George's mother. That's another whole thing. I mean, there's just been a lot. And the funny thing is that in a way, none of this is new. Posh George, an openly convicted fraudster, has been hanging out with Farage for years. You can see him in that clip of Nigel Farage having a milkshake chucked in his face. And in fact, it was while travelling with Farage in 2016 that US authorities arrested him. There's also just a long trail of financial controversies with Farage. In 2016 was also when Aaron Banks, another financial donor, was revealed to have been personally bankrolling a lavish lifestyle for Farage.
So £5,000 for the bodyguard and driver a month, £13,000 for the house in Chelsea a month. You said in 2017 that you were skint, that there was no money in politics, but there clearly was quite a lot of money in it for you, wasn't there?
Farage also came under criticism for doing readouts on the Cameo app for £87 a pop.
Now, it's a bit early in the day, so all I've got actually is coffee, but I hope you enjoy a few pints with the lads tonight. Up the rah!
Up the rah, Nigel. I mean, I know that you said sorry. I know you get 87 quid. It's entirely within your rights to do that. But come on, don't try and lecture the Irish people about the culture and history and precarious nature of peace on this island. You haven't got a clue.
There was also a whole string of investigations into whether the money that was funding Farage's various pro-Brexit parties was ultimately coming from Russia, something he denied.
And I will say this. Any thought that the Electoral Commission are neutral in what they do, of the 10 people who are on that board, I mean, 4 of them have very, very publicly given their pro-Remain views, and the rest are all part of the pro-EU establishment.
Anyway, in the past, Nigel Farage has always been able to brush off these complaints as establishment smears. But this time, the media pressure, including from allies, people who are normally on his side, has been much more intense.
My listeners want to know, Mr. Farage, how much has been spent?
With it. Nick, I can do with it as I want. I can do what I want with it. Well, I can put it on the horses.
Yes, you are under review, though, by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner.
No, but did you think that Keir Starmer should have declared his free suits from Lord Ali?
Well, they were political.
How is the suit political and £5 million, more money than most people would ever think of or ever earn or enjoy in their lives? How can that not be political?
And in response to all this, he's been quite thin-skinned and tetchy.
So, Mr. Farage, how much of that money have you spent?
Look, it's literally none of your business.
Was it a mistake not to declare the gifts from George Cottrell, sir?
You tell your bosses you harass my family anymore, and I'll take you with serious consequences. That's what your organisation has done this morning. Go away.
Nigel Farage's reaction to questions about the financial support he received from a convicted criminal.
Was it a mistake not to declare the gifts, sir?
Did you not hear me? You have broken all the rules, Leveson and everything else. Cut.
Sky News has not contacted Mr. Farage's family over the story.
So with all the pressure growing, Nigel Farage decided to do something quite drastic.
Today I will resign as a Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea, thereby forcing a by-election.
He announced he was going to resign his seat but stand again in the subsequent by-election, and so by hopefully getting re-elected would have the kind of seal of approval from the voters.
It seems to me that the establishment have now decided that they can't beat us fairly, so they've chosen to use foul means.
Explained that the money he had been given was needed for security.
I am the most physically and verbally attacked public figure or politician of modern times.
And argued that this by-election would be a rebuke to the elites that were trying to stop his movement.
This will be a people versus the establishment by-election.
Anyway, this decision hasn't really worked out for Farage because the other parties have said, we're not going to run because it's just a stunt, And that left the main challenger being this joke candidate called Count Binface.
What can you offer the people of Clacton? Have you ever been there?
No, because I understand from the current incumbent that is part of how you do the job. So I deliberately stayed away.
Count Binface's story starts with another politician calling an election when they didn't need to. Except this time it was Theresa May, the Prime Minister. Basically, she'd hoped an election would increase her majority, but it'd all gone very wrong.
But it looks as if the Tories have had a terrible night.
Amidst all this disaster, Theresa May, the Prime Minister, she has to go back to Kent to her constituency because British Prime Ministers are just MPs. It's not like a presidential system. And doing this, she's forced to endure something of a tradition of British democracy.
Known as Howling Lord Hope, the official monster raving loony party, 119.
As well as a man in a cowboy hat, there was someone dressed up as Elmo from Sesame Street, and this guy.
Harvey Jonathan David, known as Lord Buckethead, 249.
Lord Buckethead, of course, went viral all over social media, with audiences enjoying the spectacle of a leader of a nuclear power forced to stand next to someone in a cardboard spacesuit. The man behind Lord Buckethead was comedian John Harvey, who was inspired by the time the character had stood against Margaret Thatcher in 1987.
Lord Buckethead, Gremloids, 131.
Part of an effort to promote the film Gremloids, which was this Star Wars parody. In fact, after Buckethead went viral, the producer of that film wanted his character back, and that forced the comedian to rebrand.
My name is Count Binface, intergalactic space warrior, leader of the Recyclons from planet Sigma 9.
Count Binface's past policies have included replacing London's night czar with a night mayor, solving the delays caused by 20-mile-per-hour zones by making meetings start 10 minutes later, and making Piers Morgan zero emissions by 2030. And he's now become a regular part of UK elections, most recently appearing in the by-election that returned Andy Burnham, now the new Prime Minister, to Parliament. Binface is an example of a joke political candidate, part of a tradition of what Wikipedia calls frivolous political parties. And something we in the UK can be proud of is that the list on Wikipedia for the UK is longer than any other country. The person who really started this phenomenon was someone called Screaming Lord Sutch, who first stood in 1963 and who later founded the official monster raving loony party. The party pledged to abolish January and February so we can have a shorter winter, railed against there being only one Monopolies Commission, and promised a 99p coin to eliminate the hassle of receiving 1p in change.
First cabinet reshuffle. Come and shuffle along a bit. There we go, all right?
Part of the reason we have so many joke candidates and parties in the UK is that all you need to run in a general election is £500 and 10 signatures from local voters, which, as many YouTubers have realised, is pretty cheap promotion. Yeah, just give me time. I'll be part of it before you know it, I'm sure. So yes, joke parties are a very British thing, part of a national tradition of political satire, one that has even satirised joke parties.
I've a jesting old Madam Biggin,
standing at the back dressed stupidly and looking stupid party.
In this tradition, Count Binface's pledges like linking ministers' pay to nurses' pay and the promise to build at least one affordable house are jokes designed to make serious points. So it wasn't surprising that Count Binface would run in this election that Farage called. But what was surprising was that the other parties weren't going to run, and so they ended up getting behind Count Binface.
So does he not agree that what the country deserves is a televised debate between Nigel Farage and Count Binface?
My advice to everyone is put your vote in the bin.
And of course the media have found this story irresistible, with even Japanese TV apparently running a report on it. It's all been quite silly, but quite fun. There have been ideas for advertising campaigns, fan videos, and one nationwide poll found 33% of voters preferring Count Binface to win, compared to just 21% supporting Farage.
The Commons rules, which I've got in front of me here, are very, very clear, and they forbid face coverings.
Well, I mean, the Commons rules are very clear about what you can do with donations. But that seems to have got all murky, so why can't I see how the line can get tested?
I mean, even without the satirical points, the whole situation is basically quite funny. Here we have a self-important politician with their plans backfiring in their face. I mean, when nominations closed on Friday, there were 34 candidates. Nigel Farage's political stunt has turned into a pantomime. But you don't get the sense that Reform are finding this very funny. Aaron Banks, the guy we met earlier when he was bankrolling a lavish lifestyle for Farage, tweeted, "Who funds him?" Dan Wootton, disgraced former GB News presenter, announced he could reveal the identity of Binface, despite, of course, the fact it had never been a secret.
Breaking right now, I can unmask Count Binface, the so-called politician trying to beat Nigel Farage, as a leftist wannabe comedian who writes for the vile Ian Hislop on the BBC's Have I Got News For You. Let me show you the real Count Binface, given he wants to make a big play in this by-election. Here he is, John Harvey. This is the dude, this is the leftist behind the mask.
And Nigel Farage then picked up this revelation to argue that Binface was, of course, part of the establishment.
And by the way, Binface isn't really just he's a left-wing BBC comedy writer who's anti-Brexit.
Meanwhile, right-wing commentators have pronounced that Count Binface is no laughing matter, arguing his kebab price cap policy explained why Britain is getting poorer. Or they warn voters the establishment candidate in Clacton is Binface. This sense of humour failure is all the more striking because one of the reasons Nigel Farage has always been successful is his ability to use humour against his enemies.
And I don't want to be rude, but you know, really, you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you?
He was just a pretty normal guy. He drank a beer, smoked a fag, and liked making a joke. And it was his elite enemies that were the serious and solemn ones. Anyway, what to make of all this? Well, for a long time, I've been arguing that Farage's chances are overhyped. It's true that he is the most popular UK politician, but there is a low ceiling on his support, and I believe there's a strong anti-Farage majority in the country. Something Farage has found out in a whole series of by-elections he keeps losing, where voters tactically choose whatever party is most likely to beat him and his party. Add to that Labour now have a more charismatic Prime Minister, the Conservatives are doing better and likely to improve as the economy becomes more of a central issue, and also that Farage is now under pressure on the right by a new, more extreme party called Restore.
He hit minus 24 net approval this week. That is the lowest approval score that we have had for Nigel Farage since the general election.
In fact, there's lots more I could talk about. The way the party is kind of just a one-man band and how fragile that is. Not helped by the fact Farage tends to fall out with everyone he works with. How weak the party is on big issues like the NHS. And even the fact that many of his supporters are quite old and will die before the next election. But zooming out from UK politics, I think there's something bigger going on here. Something about the way that populism is self-defeating. And I think it has implications for other countries, including the US. The basic message of populist politicians is that we are with the pure people and we're against the corrupt elite. And this narrative has obscured a lot of sins. When Farage was an outsider in UK politics, his financial dealings didn't seem that important. The many scandals, his lavish lifestyle, and his money-grabbing instincts could be explained away as the hypocritical elites using establishment rules to attack his movement. But now, as we've seen, Farage is in charge of a well-funded party, the party with the largest membership, top of the polls, and with him predicted to be Prime Minister. As a result, disparaging media investigations as establishment smears is less convincing, while £5 million gifts make you seem less like the representative of the pure people and more like the corrupt elite you've been fighting. Similarly, before, Nigel Farage's constant complaining was part of a more widely shared grievance narrative. But now as he gains power and prestige, the grievance narrative seems like self-obsession, complaining about not getting paid enough, or talking about being the most physically and verbally attacked public figure when 2 MPs have been killed in recent years, and another in his own party was murdered just last week. His complaints don't seem to represent the pure people as much as just himself. It's the same with humour. Farage used to be the jester, poking at the elite's dignity, but now it's suddenly him that seems the one that's pompous. And his attempts to portray a man in a bin as the establishment, paid by the BBC, makes him seem ridiculous. Time and again, I think we're seeing how power undermines populist narratives. What is called establishment smears are revealed to be boring old corruption, righteous grievance turns into sour self-absorbed victimhood, and spiky humour becomes pompous fragility. There's a similar story in the US with Trump.
In an address to the nation, the US president, who lost that election to Joe Biden, repeated his claims it had been rigged against him.
Before, when Trump complained about the 2020 election being stolen, it supported a narrative about the elites and the deep state trying to stop the people's representative from taking power. But today, Trump's the most powerful person on the planet and the man meant to be in charge of the deep state. And his complaints about 2020 are clearly nothing to do with voters and all to do with his own wounded pride. When he was out of power, his claim of being the victim resonated with voters who felt his priorities matched theirs. But today, his pursuit of enemies through the justice system, his building of monuments to himself, everything just seems like it's about him, not the people. And the same goes for his finances and corruption. Before, it could all be looked over, not as bad as those guys. But now it seems like he's not fighting the elite, but just creating a new one. And it's even more corrupt than the last. Of course, I don't want to overstate this. While Donald Trump has lost the vote-winning coalition that won him 2024, his MAGA base still adores him, and the Democrats might waste the opportunity of his unpopularity. Similarly, Nigel Farage retains a sizable support in the polls, but I think what we're seeing is that as the populists gain power, the narratives they exploited in order to win support can now be more easily used against them. Hi, thanks for watching that. If you enjoyed that, please do check out my second channel. It's where I'm trying some less fully produced videos, talking about all sorts of things, a bit of UK politics as well. Anyway, I need 1,000 subscribers to get monetized on there. So if you're able to help me, that would be really appreciated. Otherwise, I will see you at the next one.